There's a temptation when we're experiencing grief to try and get away from it or get through it as quickly as possible. And there's this sort of model of the 6 stages of grief. And whatever the feelings we have in the moment needs to be felt and allowed in the body. And mindfulness is a skill that helps us turn to face those feelings, even the uncomfortable ones.
How would someone incorporate mindfulness into their day-to-day life? Hello, I'm Hannah and welcome to the Life and Loss podcast, where we discuss difficult topics including living with life-limiting illnesses, dying, death and bereavement. Today I'm joined by Lorien, a mindfulness coach and wellbeing expert. In this episode we will discuss how mindfulness can be used as a tool for grieving. Welcome, Lorien.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
So for those that don't know anything about mindfulness, what is it?
Yeah, well, mindfulness is actually quite difficult to describe succinctly, unfortunately. However, I refer to it as being present in the moment and bringing attention to that moment and also turning towards it as best you can. So we're filled in life with things that want to distract us in the mind. We get lost in the movie theatre of our thoughts. And oftentimes that movie theatre, the narrative of our minds, isn't always positive. It can be filled with very sort of negative circumstances, with sort of anxiety, with sadness, with all the things that we haven't done or we might be missing out on. And we can get very lost in that and we can lose our perspective on the present moment and what is. So mindfulness is a skill that can help us be more present and recognize the chatter in the mind for what it is, which can allow us then to perhaps step away from some of the chatter that isn't so helpful and supportive for us and allow our minds the opportunity to come up with something else. So it's sort of being present, being focused and accepting and allowing what is present. I think that's the essence of mindfulness, if we can really squeeze it into a nutshell.
Thank you. And how did you get involved in mindfulness? Was it an interest of yours?
It's been a long journey actually, and not the mindfulness side per se, but the journey of my own life to this point and finding solutions for my own sort of struggles with mental health and things like that. Most people who end up in a sort of a therapeutic kind of role have had a challenging experience in life in one way or another. And so I've spent a lot of time looking for practical and effective solutions that can help our headspace. And 6 years ago, I left 20 years in financial services and I moved into the health and wellness space from that. And I started working with the elderly, and that really sort of opened my eyes to the challenges that people face, particularly in later life and with a variety of illnesses and ailments, and including dementia and Parkinson's and having had strokes and things like that. And so looking for, as I say, effective strategies to help reduce people's suffering and to help them experience the best possible quality of life that they can achieve in their circumstances became something that I was really focused on. And mindfulness is one of the most effective tools for that. It really has a very powerful effect in reducing our sort of experience of suffering and allowing us to be in the moment, and can also afford us a sort of a sense of spiritual connection if we're not inherently religious. So, yeah. And
can it also be used as a tool for grieving as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mindfulness is actually extremely versatile. I mean, I'm always reluctant and wary of solutions that can sort of help with everything. It's always best to be a little bit skeptical, but mindfulness is really very diverse because it's grounding yourself in the moment and it's affording you a fresh perspective and wisdom in respect of your own life and compassion in respect of your own life and the lives of others. So absolutely it can support the grieving process. And I think there's a temptation when we're experiencing grief to try and get away from it or get through it as quickly as possible. And there's this sort of model of the 6 stages of grief, and people want to, if they become aware of that, they can want to sort of chase their way through that as quickly as possible. And the grieving process is something that we have to experience, and we have to feel, and we have to allow the emotions to take place, whether they're anger, whether it's the sadness, whether it's the depression, whatever the feelings, whether it's the numbness, whatever the feelings we have in the moment needs to be felt and allowed in the body. And mindfulness is a skill that helps us turn to face those feelings, even the uncomfortable ones, and especially the uncomfortable ones, so that they can process more naturally. So rather than getting frustrated that we're frustrated, or or angry that we've been sad for the last however long, days, weeks, whatever it is, whatever period it is, or even just, as I say, simply the numbness element of it, by having that framework that we can work with those emotions and with those feelings, it can help us to travel through the process more naturally without the frustration that we might feel with ourselves and with those around us who maybe don't understand how we're feeling as best they might wish they could.
I hope that you are finding this episode useful. Perhaps you have a question you'd like to ask. You can do this by commenting below. Your input shapes the conversations we have and the topics that we explore. So don't hesitate to reach out and let us know what you'd like to hear more of. So with grief, there's obviously a complex range of emotions like you've mentioned. So anger, denial, shock, numbness, and guilt, and even envy. Is there specific mindfulness techniques that can help with those emotions?
I mean, yes, and I think there's different techniques for sort of that might work better for different emotions. So for example, anger, focusing on the breath can be a very powerful solution, assuming that you don't have a challenge with your breath and your breathing, of course. Then working with the breath can actually naturally help reduce our feelings of anger and our experience of anger. So simply breathing gently through the nose, and focusing on the nose is preferable if possible. So if you can breathe gently through the nose and breathe as slowly as is comfortable, and focus on the physical felt sensations of that, and that will create a physiologically calming response in the body. It can also work for anxiety and other sort of mood states as well, but it can be particularly powerful for anger. Conversely, if you are feeling very sad, very depressed, you're very internalized, then sometimes meditation can be sort of I say counterintuitive, cannot be always quite so helpful, because if we are internalizing, if we're focusing on those feelings and we're not ready to, it can overwhelm us a little bit more. So there's a practice within mindfulness, within meditation, called metta, which is loving kindness, where you visualize someone else that you want to wish well for, and you focus on them, and you gently in your mind, you intone genuine and sincere statements about them feeling well, them being happy, them being free from suffering, free from harm, meeting their goals in life, whatever it is, just genuine statements, as long as it's a genuine thing. And that helps us take ourselves out of ourselves and project positive intentions towards someone else, and that can in turn help lift our spirits and our state of mind. So with mindfulness, there are different tools, or different tools in the box, if you like. You can focus on your feet, your hands, any part of the body that you don't have a sort of a negative relationship with. And if you were in particular pain, for example, with the breath or with the hands, depending on your circumstances, for example, then you might not want to bring attention to those, but you might find something else in your body that does feel okay, perhaps your ears or your nose or your lips or something, anything. So you can attune to the body and you can focus on that, you can focus on the breath, you can focus externally on other people, or even on an object such as a coffee cup. So there is a sort of a very diverse range of options within the mindful toolbox to accommodate more or less any circumstance.
And when we talk about grief, we're often referring to someone who's lost someone that they love, but actually you can grieve for the loss of your own future if you've been given a palliative prognosis or a terminal diagnosis. Do you find mindfulness can also help with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been quite a few studies around it. And in fact, in 2023, there was a meta-study, which is a collation of other studies, which reviewed 600 palliative cases and some dyad relationships with carers, with spouses, and found that mindfulness was very powerful at reducing the experience of suffering, as well as anxiety and depression. It could improve appetite and help rest, and that was for the people in the palliative position, and also sort of their direct carers, which was really interesting. And I think it's the experience of suffering that mindfulness again can really help with, because there's the direct pain, there's the sort of the real experience that we're having, and then there's the mental addition, the layer that we add to it, that our thoughts, this movie theatre that I talked about at the start. And if our movie is playing on top of the pain that we are genuinely in, telling us terrible things, the thoughts of fear, the thoughts of regret, the thoughts of loss, then that magnifies the situation. And mindfulness can help mitigate that suffering element. It can't resolve the symptoms. It's not, it obviously can't do that. That's where medicine comes in and other things try to help. But what it can do is it can help transform our relationship with our thoughts and transform our relationship with ourselves. And that can have, as I say, a very powerful, profound effect on our experience of suffering. And that's where the real qualitative experience can be felt.
How would someone incorporate mindfulness into their day-to-day life? So
it can be very simple. So a lot of people get put off meditation or mindfulness because they think that they need to sort of be meditating on a mountaintop with a serene surroundings and for hours or days or weeks, etc., etc. But actually, I find myself, and when I'm sort of teaching other people, that helping people establish very bite-size, especially here in the West, we've got very short attention spans by default. And so bite-sized chunks can really help us. And as doing something as little as a mindful minute. So put a stopwatch on your phone, for example, and just watch the countdown for a minute. And while you're doing that, notice what your thoughts are. And your thoughts might be, well, this is ridiculous, how's this going to help? Or I must be doing this next, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter what your thoughts are. The point is, for 1 minute, you're just going to notice the thoughts that are coming up. And you can then inject this, or you can do it with a breath for a minute, or focus on your feet for a minute, any aspect that you choose. And because you're only doing it for a minute, you can inject those minutes as often into your day as you can. So if you're waiting to boil a kettle, or you're cooking your tea, or you're watching television, you've got an ad break, whatever it is, or you're sat in your car, there are all these moments in our days where we're between one thing and another. And these afford us spaces where we could just be looking at Instagram on our phone, of course, which is what many people do. But there is the opportunity to practice being present. And because you create space in your day to do that, and you can remind yourself with a phone reminder to go off every now and again to say, oh, perhaps you want to do a mindful minute. But that can be a really simple and effective way of building the skill. That the essence of mindfulness is realizing that we're stuck in the movie of our mind. Yeah. That really is it. And once you recognize that and you sort of wake up, in essence, from that sort of the dream of watching the movie and being lost in your thoughts, that's the power of it. And then you allow essentially the mind to reset itself and see what happens next.
And if anyone wants to learn more about mindfulness or is interested in maybe starting it, how would they do that, and what resources do you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they can connect with me via my website, of course. But there are lots of people out there, and with most of these things, it's finding someone that you resonate with. So if your audience resonate with me, then fantastic. But if they think, my gosh, what a terrible person this is, then find someone else, find someone you do resonate with. And as I say, there are lots of resources out there. I mean, there's the Headspace app, for example. There's the Waking Up app, which I think is very good. There's also sort of more grassroots institutions like Conscious Together. So there are plenty of resources out there. There's lots of stuff on YouTube that's completely free. Anyone can dip into it. There are also 8-week courses that people can do. So if you're interested in really building a habit, there are 8-week programs that you can do. And again, there are lots of people offering these sorts of training courses, development courses, because mindfulness is a skill. It is something you need to practice. So even if you listen to this today and you try it and you think, oh, that's interesting, if you don't practice it, like any skill, it won't develop. You don't imagine that by reading a book on playing football, you could play football better, for example. You appreciate you have to play the game, you have to practice. And mindfulness is a skill, and so practice, practice, practice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Life and Loss podcast. If you're interested in hearing more about our charity, you can visit our website, which is www.forestholmehospice.org.uk. Thank you. If you found this episode useful, click the subscribe button. Share this episode with a friend or a loved one, and don't forget to give us a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means so much.